I don't know why I'm obsessed with it. It's like, I just wonder if you could pick anything and look into it this way and find all of these oddities. I'm starting to feel like that's just the way the world is. I know, I know. Anyway, I gotta go. I'm getting ready to do. All right, bye. Oh, hello there, guys. This is Val, and I am True Crime Curiosities. I just wanted to start a channel because I have so much stuff, and maybe I have a fresh perspective, maybe I don't. Some of this stuff other people may have said, and if I remember getting it from someone else, I will definitely give them a shout out. If I don't remember and I think it was my own unique idea, then I won't. Um, it's not my intention to repeat other people's ideas or steal other people's ideas, because I think that is in poor taste and disrespectful. So that's kind of all I want to say about that. So I really just want to start off talking about the defendant in the Idaho 4 case. There's been a lot of talk I've noticed lately on the various channels that I watch regarding his defense team. People are somewhat critical of his defense team, and people are even reaching out, it seems, to attorneys. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle about one person that may or may not have reached out to a defense team asking them to represent him. Regardless of the veracity of any of those claims, I think it's kind of interesting. People really feel like he's not being defended properly. I know that public defenders in general have a bad rap, and that may be true or not true in this case, but I don't necessarily think it is true, and here's why. Let's just talk a little bit about his defense team. So we know Ann Taylor. She is the one who everyone knew right off the bat. And just a little bit about Ann Taylor. She was named the county's public defender in, I think it was 2017. And there was an article I read about her at the time, and it says, ever since Ann Taylor went to work for the Kootenai, however you say, Kootenai County Public Defender's Office in 2004, she thought it would be great to lead that department. Quote, I always thought that was the job I'd want someday, end quote, she told the press. Friday was that day. Taylor, who has specialized in criminal defense in private practice for the firm of Palmer, George, and Taylor for the past 5 years, was hired as the new Kootenai County Public Defender. So she worked in private practice as a criminal defense attorney and then became the county's public defender, which I think is the opposite of what usually happens, right? I think, well, here, let me read further before I say anything. Prior to private practice, she worked for the public defender's office from 2004 to 2012. Okay, so she worked for public defender, went into private practice, and then 5 years later, she became, she was then back at the public defender's, Kootenai County, again. It says, she says again, in quotes, it's such a necessary work, she says, referring to what interested her in the public defender position. It's important to make sure constitutional rights apply to everybody. You help people who are facing horrible times. I love the work. Taylor takes over for John Adams, who retired in March after nearly 21 years as the chief public defender. She's an Idaho native. She earned a bachelor's degree in political science, master's degree in public administration, and a doctorate degree from the University of Idaho in 1998, practiced law at the federal, state, and local levels, worked for 5 years in the prosecutor's office, so she's been on the other side as a prosecutor, and she serves on the board of the Idaho Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and she's death penalty certified in Idaho. Quote, as I begin this journey, I'm excited to do my very best, and most of all, I have gratitude for all of the members of the Public Defender's Office. I am grateful to be welcomed by an outstanding office, and I am looking forward to us standing together to advocate for citizens in Kootenai County. And the commission chairman, Mark Eberlein, said the county is excited to have Taylor return. Quote, she is well respected in the community and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to this position. We have every confidence that she and her staff will continue the tradition of providing an excellent level of service to the community and to their clients. End quote. The Public Defender's Office provides legal representation as court-appointed attorneys for indigent clients in criminal cases, including felony, misdemeanor, and civil cases, as well as for juveniles in criminal cases and for children and their families in child protective hearings. So she's obviously well educated. She's from the state of Idaho. She worked in the Public Defender's Office previously. She worked in the prosecutor's office previously, and then she came back and was elected as the chief county defender for that county. So this is someone who is, and she's also very interested in protecting constitutional rights and feels they apply to everyone. So she understands that people who are indigent and such are the people who do not have those rights protected very often. She sounds very sincere. Could she be full of crap? Sure. People fool us all the time. But in this article, and this was several years ago, I don't see what her point would be to put up this sort of front. She could have just continued in her criminal defense private practice if she had no bone in her body to do things that would benefit others and help society as a whole. She has 2 reviews that I found, people that had hired her, and these also, one was from 2016, another 2017. The first one says, she's great, smart, ethical, caring, and truly believes in serving justice, in all capitals. She cares about her clients and the truth, will always follow the law and do the right thing, never gives up her fight for justice, and has 5 stars. And the other review is, the best. Anne is the best attorney a person could have. I'm so thankful for all her dedication and hard work. Her job isn't a job, it's her life, and she's always there no matter what. She also works with Sean Walsh, and they are one kick-ass team. Sean is smart and aggressive. They are excellent fighters, highly recommended. And that was, like I said, 2016. So those are 2 really great reviews, another 5 stars. And this was well prior to any issue that she's involved in right now with the defendant. So this was Ann Taylor when I looked into her. And I understand people aren't happy about how she sort of didn't give him a lot of notice, the defendant, in terms of waiving his right to a speedy trial. And I question that as well. But rather than beat her up, I think I can look at this and say, this woman may very well be altruistic as a public defender. It seems that, we'll find out. But she has done quite a bit so far. Now, the next person a lot of people look at and have actually sort of, torn apart a little bit for his argument in terms of the appeal regarding the grand jury was Jay Logsdon. Jay Logsdon is not your average attorney, just in the sense that, if you just look at Jay Logsdon, you can tell this guy is, he's a rebel. Okay, this guy is a rebel. He's got his big earring, and he just looks like he's going to start some shit. I mean, I don't know. I picture this guy as like a punk rocker type in high school, or just somebody who thinks outside of the box, clearly is willing to take risks and does not care. He doesn't mind being criticized, doesn't mind being laughed at. He doesn't care. he's willing to sort of just do what it takes. Uh, so I looked into JLoxam a little bit. The first thing I saw was a letter that he wrote. He wrote a letter because he was really pressed about this. In 2021, there were some new rules that were proposed by the Public Defense Commission. And basically what they were doing was they were creating more obstacles for people to become public defenders. And so the letter, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's lengthy, but he's pretty pressed about it. He says, "My name is Jay Logston. I will have been a public defender in Kootenai County for 10 years come this October, and I am currently a chief deputy." So this was in 2021. So at that time, he had already been a public defender for 10 years. "I have heard the claims that the proposed rewrite of the rules for the Public Defense Commission changes nothing. And this is simply for clarification. That is untrue. Let me begin by saying that there's no statutory basis for much of what is in these proposed rules. I will then point out the powers the rules suggest they have over other branches of government. And finally, I will point out what is most troubling, that the governor will have complete control of public defenders." Again, this guy questions authority. He doesn't like a lot of government control. And, he doesn't mind questioning it. He doesn't mind going up against the grain. He says the current rules essentially make every practicing attorney working as a public defender a public defender. There was no roster to which we had to apply. The new rules create hurdles to becoming a public defender, despite the fact that the requirements to be a public defender are already set by law, and then it gives the law. The law that created the Public Defense Commission did not change that. Rather, it set out standards for defending attorneys to utilize. That is, standards for our work environment to ensure we are able to adequately represent our clients. It had no intention of questioning our ability to practice law. The current leaders of the Public Defense Commission's proposed rules fly in the face of this law. And so he's just not happy because essentially the Public Defense Commission, and it seems they've actually gone ahead and done this, because I remember hearing something about how in the state of Idaho you have to be on a roster, and it seems like there's some application process now and some credentialing that you have to have in order to be a public defender. And Jay is not happy about it. Before, anyone who wanted to be a public defender could simply be a public defender if they were defending the public. But after these rules were put in place, there was more credentialing and critiquing and this sort of thing, and he really wasn't having it. In the end, he says, "I wish to address finally something that seems to be lost in these attempts to overhaul our public defense system. I want to object to the idea that Idaho has a public defense problem. I object to the idea that the courageous men and women that fight the police, prosecutors, and judges every day protecting our constitutional rights are the ones putting innocent people in jail." That's really interesting. Let's read that again. "I want to object to the idea that Idaho has a public defense problem. I object to the idea that the courageous men and women that fight the police, prosecutors, and judges every day, protecting our constitutional rights, are the ones putting innocent people in jail." So he's basically saying people that are claiming that public defenders fighting police, prosecutors, and judges by protecting constitutional rights are the ones putting innocent people in jail. He says, "I object to the idea that somehow the group with the most scrutiny of any category of attorney from the judges, law enforcement, the bar, post-conviction relief claims, and malpractice lawsuits is in need of yet another layer of control. I object to the idea that we are why hundreds of people are in our jails right now for petty offenses. I object to the idea we are why thousands of cases now wait for trials that do not seem to come while our Supreme Court, by a judicial fiat, has done away with our right to a speedy trial. I object to claims that we make criminal justice expensive. We do not control how many people are prosecuted or for what, or whether a case with clear evidentiary issues must be litigated, or whether pseudoscience is brought to court to put people in prison. I mean, come on. This guy sounds like somebody who is perfectly suited for this defendant. Okay? Again, this is a defense attorney, like most defense attorneys, who is extremely interested in protecting somebody's constitutional rights. He's also not afraid to look at old laws, quirky laws, laws that other people haven't thought of or anything like that. The guy thinks out of the box. He's not afraid to say what needs to be said in a somewhat, I would say, almost aggressive, but certainly assertive manner. So I think the guy is, I respect what the guy is saying and doing. And he's going up against people, and this was, again, before the defendant was ever arrested or any of this crime was ever even committed. So let's look at, I've heard a couple times now, well, you should look and see what these people, do with, people that they're representing now. JLR, I've heard you how many times talk about how much these people are getting paid. They're getting paid $8,000 a week. They have other cases. That's what most attorneys get paid, JLR. And most attorneys have full schedules. They don't just have one case that they focus on. It's not how it works. Unfortunately, most attorneys have other cases, including, maybe a death penalty case, maybe two at a time. That's not, you don't just get one case as an attorney and then you just work on that 24/7. That's not how the world works. And they get paid well for it. Certainly being the schooling that they've gone through, the public service, and then being death penalty certified. These things, are skills that are gained. And so they get paid for it. Yeah, they should. Part of the problem is many people who should be getting paid well, like police, teachers, like Lana was saying in one of her videos the other night I was listening to. It's correct. A lot of the people, so if you want to start taking money away from defense attorneys, good luck if someone or you get arrested and you need a good defense, because then we're really in trouble. So it's good that these people are getting paid well. It's good that they're getting paid well. Okay, so I'm looking at this case. It's attorneys debate death penalty in the Ross case. And this has to do with a man who is committed a crime recently in Idaho and has been charged with the death penalty. And Ann and Jay are representing him. So 2nd District Judge Mark Monson heard, this was in August of this year, 2023, heard 16 motions for 3 hours in the murder trial for Richard Ross. So for 3 hours, 16 motions were put forth to this judge regarding this defendant, Richard Ross. Okay? Regarding the death penalty. They were basically trying to have the death penalty taken off the table. Okay? So I think they put in a little bit of time. I think they were a little bit concerned about this guy. It says Ross is charged with the first-degree murders of 76-year-old Edwina Eddie Devon and her 57-year-old son, Michael Devon. The investigation shows Ross allegedly either smothered, strangled, or inflicted violence on Eddie Devon at her Grangeville home the night of September 30th, 2021, and then smothered or inflicted violence on Michael Devon early the next morning in Lewiston before burning his remains in Devon's truck on Nez Perce Drive, according to the PCA. During the motion hearing, the defense called 2 witnesses for their argument, a professor, Elisa Massoth from U of I, and Dr. Barbara Wolf, a medical examiner and forensic pathologist from Leesburg, Florida. The defense had the 2 witnesses testify by Zoom regarding their motion to rule out the death penalty on various grounds. So they bring in 2 experts and they present some data, and they really just talk about how the death penalty overall is cruel and unusual, especially in the state of Idaho. The state of Idaho, to be eligible for death penalty, it has to be a first-degree murder, which means the murder occurred while another felony was taking place, such as a kidnapping or burglary, or have aggravating factors such as being especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. And so she goes on to discuss how that is that last part, the aggravating factors, because that's subjective, right? And so because of that, many times the prosecution seeks the death penalty, because what murder isn't really atrocious or cruel or heinous? Now, this one clearly sounds like it may have been particularly that way, and therefore qualifies. But it doesn't matter. They're arguing as a whole. And so she goes on to say that 21% of the cases that were deemed eligible for death penalty, of those 21%, 5% went to trial and 3% resulted in a death sentence. But that Kootenai County, Canyon, and Ada County had more of these cases than all the other counties combined. So basically, one of the experts talks about the research and says that these counties seem to be the ones that really want to push for death penalty. Logsdon also goes over the research and shows that these death penalty cases are arbitrarily applied in the state because of this aggravating factor rule that we talked about a second ago. And then in terms of the county, so depending on what county you live in, depending, what prosecutor you get, it really is just sort of very, luck of the draw type thing. And so he also brings up the fact that, counties get financial gain from pushing for the death penalty, which is really sick, by the way. And he tries to make a connection there, that, this is why they do it. It looks like he really can't make much of a connection, but regardless, he states that this is not a good thing. And I agree. His other expert testifies about using a firing squad as a mean of execution, and says that if a person is shot in the heart and it's not completely disrupted, it can continue to pump blood to the brain, and the brain has a reserve of oxygen. She basically says it's cruel and unusual. And then Logsdon used an example of a firing squad in his argument, and says that the Idaho legislature recently decided this is a method, and that this is a likely scenario, because it's often that the Idaho Department of Correction has difficulty acquiring drugs for execution. And he thinks that this is unconstitutional, sending someone to death row without knowing how they would be executed. And that's also cruel and unusual, violation of the 8th Amendment right. And I agree with him. So, they go on for 3 hours arguing this, okay? I don't know what the result of this was. I didn't look. But Jay also brings up, and I love it, he brings up an old 1920s case, and he and the judge go back and forth. I'm not going to get into that right here, but it's pretty interesting. And the other thing that I found interesting here was, just the whole death penalty issue. I myself am against the death penalty no matter what. And if you look up Amnesty International, just internationally, they feel the same way I do, and the world feels the same way as well. I'm not saying that everyone has to feel like I do. Everyone has opinion, and you should have your own opinion on this. I'm not trying to convince anybody that I'm right. I'm just saying this is how I feel. 2 people last year in the United States of America who were on death row were exonerated. I don't know how many people, we'll never know, have been executed that were innocent, but I don't think that it's okay. I also don't think it's okay to ever put the power of executing a person in the state's hand, ever. I just don't think it's ever okay to do that. I think it's a wrong move. So those are my reasons. I also think that the judgment for a person is not meant to be given by another man. It's only meant to be given by themselves and God, and that's it. So those are my feelings on it. But the world as a whole, if you look at Amnesty International, there's a graph here, and it shows that countries over the course of the last, I don't know, like 30, 40, 50 years, more and more countries are abolishing the death penalty, and the countries that do have the death penalty are executing less and less people. Now, the 5 countries that have done the most executions, there's a list of them, and we're on that list. You don't want to be on the list. There's China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, I think North Korea. I'm not sure. We don't even know what they do over in that country. Does anybody really know what's going on in North Korea? Because I feel like it's just really one of those odd countries. I just question that whole country as a whole. But regardless, United States is on that list. We're the only Western civilization, or not Western civilization, we're the only country, like, none of the European countries do this, right? I don't even think any of the South American or Central American countries do this. Canada doesn't do this. Greenland, Iceland, I mean, the United States, I think it's barbaric that we still do the death penalty. And now, not only lethal injection, they're going to do firing squads. I just feel like there's something wrong. And that's my opinion. But moving on. So, yeah, they're arguing like hell. Now, you might say to yourself, well, why are they arguing so much about the death penalty for this guy, but not for the defendant in Idaho 4? Well, I think it's because this man, unfortunately, did not have the luck our defendant had. He was not immediately assigned a public defender like the defendant was, Ann Taylor. I know a lot of people have questions about how did Ann Taylor get on the case so quickly, blah, blah, blah. I think because they knew this was going to be a high-profile case, and they wanted to make sure that somebody was on it. They did not want this to go to trial, or they did not want him in prison without a public defender on board. And that's why he was assigned someone, and it happened to be Ann Taylor. That's my thoughts on that. I could be wrong. Because this other guy here, Ross, he got arrested, and guess what? He wasn't assigned a public defender. And not only did he not get assigned a public defender, he didn't have a grand jury or a preliminary hearing. And he waived both of them. So he's going to trial now. And now he finally has a public defender. I guess they got around to it after months. And they happen to be Jay and Ann. But let's think about that for a second. Okay? When people want to question why, or how did the defendant get these guys? Like, there's something fishy about that. They were assigned on purpose to create some kind of, like, evil plot against him or the state, or I don't have no idea. No, I really, truly believe that he was assigned public defenders immediately because the state knew enough, or the county knew enough, that this was going to be a hugely followed case, and that this guy had better have his constitutional rights protected because people were going to be looking at it. They probably didn't know they'd be looking at it this much, but they knew they'd be looking at it. And they're lucky they did, because this other guy, Ross, this poor soul, was not so lucky, and he did not get anybody. And I'll repeat it, the man didn't. He waived his right. Okay, he waived his right to a grand jury and a preliminary hearing. He had neither when he was charged. So he was charged and with a death penalty, and that was another thing they argued in their 6 hours. So that's just my thought on that, and it's something to really think about. It just shows you our justice system. It is screwed up. There are problems. There are major problems. And it's just another example of one. Okay, so I saved the best for last, and I think I know people know about it. I know Sleuthy Goosey, she's like always the first on all this stuff. Like, you can't slip one by on this girl. Like, she's got it. I don't know how she does it, but she does it. And I think it's great. Anybody who's on it like this, it's great. I think she might have been the first person that put this out, and I feel like it's just flown under the radar. I saw it. I didn't pay much attention to it, but I also wasn't really criticizing the defense team. And since everybody was sort of questioning it, I was like, all right, well, let me look into this, because people are now like taking it upon themselves to really talk about this. He needs a better defense. Like, if I had the money, I would buy him a really good defense attorney. I mean, and I get it, right? People really care about it. I don't know that I care about it that much. It's not that I don't care about people. It's just I don't know if he's innocent or guilty. I'm not saying that he's guilty whatsoever. I don't see in the PCA anything that really convinces me that he's guilty at all. However, we definitely don't know anything. They have sealed everything, including sealing what they're sealing. I mean, like, you can't seal anything more than this. It's clearly a lot of federal involvement, even though it's not a federal case. I feel like it should have been a federal case. I feel like this should have been a federal case, because there's so much federal involvement in this. There's so much secrecy and sealing upon sealing. And so I don't know what I don't know. And so that makes me suspicious. And obviously I'm not the only one. Regardless, let's just pull out our card here. So first we'll just talk about this guy here, John Werdeman. Let's talk about John Werdeman. He's listed in the National Registry of Exonerations. At about 2:30 a.m. on June 15th, the year 2000, 52-year-old Linda LeBrain was driving east from her home in Port Townsend, Washington, on Interstate 84 near the town of Caldwell in eastern Idaho when her car was forced off the road. 3 assailants, 2 men and a woman, pushed their way into her car, and she was driven away. A third man followed in the assailant's car, and the group stopped on a deserted road near a beet field. There, LeBrain was beaten with a baseball bat, stabbed, and robbed for $40 and a credit card, and left on the side of the road. A short time later, the group returned and set her car on fire. She was rescued by 2 teenagers who came upon the blaze. Let's just stop there for a minute. What in the actual fudge is wrong with people? Honestly. The $40? Really? $40 fucking dollars and a credit card. And this is what you're going to do to somebody. I can't. I don't know what this is the world that we live in. It's the world we live in, right? $40 and a credit card. That's all that this woman's life. That was worth more than this woman's life to these people. The Canyon County Sheriff's Office investigated the case. LeBrain worked with a sketch artist, and this woman survived. LeBrain worked with a sketch artist to create composite draw, and God bless these 2 teenagers who came up upon that car and found her. They came back and they set the car on fire too. Like, it wasn't enough that they beat her with a bat, stabbed and robbed her. They left and they came back and they set the car on fire. Okay. Anyway, these 2 teenagers came by, and God bless these kids, came back and they rescued her. So she was able to give a sketch artist some composite drawings, and then it received a lot of publicity at the time. It was even featured on America's Most Wanted. And then 2 years later, in March of 2002, a viewer of that program in Rock Hill, South Carolina, called in a tip. The viewer said one of the sketches looked like Kenneth Werdeman, 33, who had lived in Caldwell for a brief time before moving to South Carolina. Waterman was arrested and extradited to Idaho. It was that easy. Somebody said, "Oh, it looks like this guy. He lived in Caldwell for a little while. Now he lives here." So they arrested the guy. This guy then identifies the two other men in the attack as his younger brother, John Waterman, and Jerry Sanchez. John Waterman was in an Idaho prison at the time on an unrelated conviction for credit card fraud. On March 11, 2002, he was charged in the attack on LaBrayne after she picked him out of a video lineup. A fourth suspect, Sarah Pierce, 19, was arrested a month later. So this guy is in South Carolina. He gets extradited to Idaho. He identifies two other people as the culprits, John Waterman and Jerry Sanchez. Even though originally it was two men and a woman, this guy's now saying it's these other two men. This other lady gets arrested. Kenneth Waterman pled guilty to robbery and aggravated assault. He did not testify against his brother, but did testify against Sanchez, who after a mistrial was convicted on October 2003 of conspiracy to commit robbery, conspiracy to commit first-degree kidnapping, aggravated battery. Okay. Ken Waterman pled guilty to robbery. Okay. Yada, yada. All right. Based largely on LaBrayne's testimony and identification, John Waterman was convicted of conspiracy to commit robbery and all these other things. And he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences plus 55 years. Waterman didn't testify at his trial. A supervisor at the factory where he worked as a welder told the jury that Waterman was on the job just hours before LaBrayne was attacked, and again, less than 4 hours after the assault. Ken Waterman, in an affidavit filed in an appeal by Sanchez, recanted his confession and said that neither he, his brother, nor Sanchez was involved. So there's a lot of fuckery going on here. It's a lot of fuckery already. Okay, I'm already confused. I'd have to reread this 3 times, but you can see there's fuckery. So in a post-conviction hearing in 2015, John Waterman's new attorney, here we go, Elisa Massoth, argued that Waterman's trial lawyers had provided ineffective counsel by failing, among other things, to challenge the police video lineup where LaBrayne identified John Waterman. Massoth identified several problems that undercut the validity of the identification process. The attack had occurred nearly 2 years earlier. LaBrayne had suffered traumatic head injury. In addition, she had smoked 2 marijuana joints on the night of the crime, and at some point during the attack, she lost her glasses. Her vision was impaired. LaBrayne said that although it was dark, her interior dome light was on for a brief part of the attack, and that her attacker's face was at times within 3 inches of her own. LaBrayne had described that assailant, the one who drove her car and later stabbed her, as likely Hispanic or Native American, tall, thin, with long, greasy hair. She said he lacked facial hair. Massoth identified several problems. Sorry, I already said that. Okay. In the aftermath of the attack while recovering at her home in Washington, LaBrayne had viewed 3 separate photos. So she goes on, but this woman, Massoth, she goes in. Okay, she goes in and basically identifies all of these issues. And guess what happens? Waterman was exonerated. He was exonerated because Elisa Massoth came in, said he had ineffective counsel, and basically Waterman was exonerated. He subsequently sued his trial lawyers, Scott Fauser and Vinoy Bishop, for malpractice, and then he went and asked for state compensation after the state passed a compensation law. That claim was denied in November 2022, but it's being appealed. Okay, so that Elisa Massoth, well, guess what? Elisa Massoth, I saw this. Bryan Kohberger, the suspect accused of murdering 4 Idaho students, has hired one of the top criminal defense lawyers in the state, Elisa Massoth, a Capital qualified criminal attorney. She previously attended the same college as the four slain Idaho victims. She filed a notice of appearance with the 2nd Judicial District Court on Tuesday. Will be joining Kohberger's defense team as he gears up for his next court appearance. His new attorney is described as being, quote, fearless, a persistent advocate with compassion and a winning strategy, end quote. Okay, so that article, they ended up taking that down because there's disinfo there. He didn't hire her, okay? She was brought onto the team by Ann, okay? And this is what Sleuthy had put up that I saw. Supplemental Capital Criminal Defense Provider Agreement. So this woman apparently is not somebody who typically is a public defender. She's somebody that you pay a lot of money to defend you. But she entered into an agreement and she signs it on February 17, 2023, with Latah County, Kootenai County, Ann Taylor, and Jay Logston, that they entered in December 30th, and it's $180 per hour. That's what they're getting paid. I don't know where they're getting the $8,000 a week or whatever, but that's what this says. So she entered into that agreement there. So some more about her. Elisa Massoth began her career as a clerk for Idaho District Judges Horton and McLaughlin before practicing business and real estate related law at the firm Moffitt, Thomas, Barrett, Rock and Fields in the city of Boise. She gained recognition as a prosecutor and was eventually appointed senior staff attorney. So she also used to be a prosecutor. She was a distinguished figure within the world of Idaho law. Massoth was appointed to several high-profile positions. She's a criminal justice panel representative, a member of the IACDL Legislative Committee, as well as the former president of the Idaho Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys. This lady is no joke. She's also founded firms, a couple of them listed, and reported by National Registry of Exonerations, and she's known for a case where she had a conviction overturned. Okay, so she's good. She's no joke, and she's a really good trial attorney as well. I have some things that I read about her, but this woman is the trial attorney. So when people start talking about Jay and Ann and how, I don't think they're going to be very good during the trial, they don't need to be good during the trial. This is the trial attorney right here, this lady. She's the superstar. So I think he's covered, guys. I really do. I could be wrong. I'm not trying to be a know-it-all. I certainly don't know everything. But as far as I can see, he's got 3 really good attorneys that seem to care quite a bit about constitutional law, protecting people's rights, obviously. And this woman right here she's sharp. She's very sharp. So that's really all I want to say for now. I have quite a lot of stuff in my brain up here of curiosities about this case that I'll be putting out. This is my first one, and I hope you enjoyed it. And see you on the next one.